The 12 pirate ships moved through space like hungry sharks. Their hulls were painted black with red markings that looked like flames. Each ship carried enough weapons to destroy a small moon. The pirates inside were confident this would be an easy fight. Kextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the human vessel through his ship's main screen. He was a large reptile with green scales and yellow eyes that glowed in the dark. His species, the Saurians, had been raiders. For thousands of years, they believed that strong species deserved to take whatever they wanted from weak ones. "Look at that pathetic ship," Kextar said to his crew, pointing one clawed finger at the screen. "It looks like someone threw scrap metal into space and called it a vessel. These humans are even more helpless than the last ones we captured." His crew laughed and made jokes about how quickly they would finish this fight. They had fought hundreds of battles against dozens of species. They had never lost a single ship to an enemy. Today would be no different. On the human ship, Jake gathered his senior officers in the small room they used for meetings. The table was made from 3 different types of alien metal welded together. The chairs did not match, and 2 of them were too small for humans. The lights kept changing color because the Hylorian mood sensors thought the room was underwater. "All right, people," Jake said. "We have 12 ships coming at us, each one bigger and stronger than ours. Our weapons are old, our shields are broken, and our engines want to fly in different directions. Anyone have any ideas?" Lisa Rodriguez pulled up a picture of their ship on the wall screen. The image kept flickering between showing their ship and what looked like a recipe for alien soup. "Captain, I've been thinking about our problems. Every system on this ship was made by different aliens who never talked to each other. They all use different languages, different energy types, and different ways of thinking." "That sounds like more problems, not solutions," said Ben Carter. "But what if we made it into a solution?" Lisa continued. "Right now, our systems are fighting because they cannot understand each other. The Zephyrian computers think in light patterns. The Draknari systems think in heat and electricity. The Klinari technology thinks in living energy. They are like 3 people trying to have a conversation when each person speaks a different language." Amy Walsh, who had been listening to alien radio signals, suddenly looked up from her station. "Wait, I think I understand. When I try to send messages using our mixed communication systems, other ships receive garbage. Their computers cannot figure out what we are saying because we are speaking in 6 languages at once." "Exactly," Lisa said, getting excited. "What if we used that confusion as a weapon? What if we made our ship so confusing that enemy sensors cannot figure out where we are or what we are doing?" Chief Science Officer Peter Kim nodded slowly. The Hylorian quantum computers could create interference patterns with the Zephyrian energy systems. That might scramble their targeting computers. And if we reroute power through the Klinari gravity systems while the Draknari plasma vents are firing, Lisa added, we could create a space distortion field, nothing too fancy, but enough to make their sensors think we are in multiple places at the same time. Jake felt hope growing in his chest. His crew was not talking about fixing their ship's problems. They were talking about using those problems as weapons. "How long would you need to set this up?" "Give me 25 minutes, Lisa said, "and someone needs to keep bringing me coffee." "You have it," Jake replied. "Everyone else, get to your stations. We are about to try something that no one in the galaxy has ever done before." The crew scattered to their positions. Lisa ran to the engine room with Peter right behind her. Amy began working on the communication systems. Ben tried to make sense of the navigation controls, which were currently showing him a map of alien shopping centers. In the engine room, Lisa stared at the maze of pipes, wires, and energy conduits that made up their ship's power system. Everything was connected to everything else in ways that made no sense. Zephyrian crystal energy flowed through Draknari plasma conduits, Klinari bioenergy mixed with Hylorian quantum fields. Vorthan neural networks tried to talk to computers that thought in mathematics instead of emotions. "Peter, Can you make the Hylorian quantum processors start an argument with the Zephyrian navigation system? An argument? Make them disagree about where we are. If they cannot agree on our location, maybe enemy sensors will get confused too. Peter started typing commands into a keyboard that had symbols from 4 different alien languages. I can make the quantum processors think we are moving backward in time, while the navigation system thinks we are moving forward. That should create some interesting disagreements. Meanwhile, Amy was working on making their communication systems even more confusing than they already were. She connected the Draknari battle communications to the Klinari poetry networks. She mixed Zephyrian technical data with Hylorian emotion broadcasts. The result was a signal that sounded like angry robots trying to sing love songs. Lisa, I can broadcast our mixed signals on all the pirate ship frequencies at once. Their computers will not know what to do with the information. Perfect. Ben, how are those engines coming? Ben was staring at 3 different engine control panels, each one built by a different species. I can make the Zephyrian drive think we want to go to coordinates that do not exist. The Draknari engines will try to compensate by going in the opposite direction. And the Hylorian stabilizers will try to keep us from going anywhere at all. That sounds like it would tear the ship apart, Peter said. Or make us move in ways that physics says are impossible, Lisa replied. Which is exactly what we want. Jake's voice came over the communication system. 5 minutes until the pirates reach weapons range. How are we doing down there? Lisa looked around the engine room. Sparks were flying from every junction box. The lights were flashing in colors that hurt to look at. Strange humming sounds came from the walls. Energy flowed in directions that made no sense. It was beautiful chaos. We are ready, Captain. This is either going to be the most amazing thing ever, or we are all going to die in a very interesting way. Those are the best odds we have had all day, Jake replied. Let's show these pirates what humans can do with a ship that should not exist. The pirate ships moved closer, their weapons charging up for the attack. They expected to destroy the human ship with their first shots. Instead, they were about to discover that humans had turned their ship's greatest weakness into something the galaxy had never seen before. 6 months after the Great Defeat, Jake Morrison stood in a deep underground chamber carved from solid rock. The room was 300 meters below the surface of New Texas, hidden beneath layers of stone and metal that no alien scanner could penetrate. Around him, dozens of people worked on the most important project in human history. The mission to steal the quantum processors from New Montana had been successful. Pete Johnson and his team had managed to break into the alien mining facility and escape with everything Dr. Amy Walsh needed. 3 people were wounded in the escape, but everyone made it out alive. The processors were now part of a massive machine that filled most of the underground chamber. Amy stood next to the machine, checking the connections for the 100th time. Her hands were shaking slightly from exhaustion and nervous energy. She had been working for 18 hours straight to make sure everything was perfect. This machine was her life's work, and humanity's future depended on it working correctly. Are you sure this will reach every human settlement in the galaxy? Jake asked. He trusted Amy completely, but the plan seemed almost impossible. They were trying to send a signal across thousands of light years using technology they barely understood. The quantum transmitters will create a network effect, Amy explained, wiping sweat from her forehead. Each receiver will automatically boost the signal and send it to the next location. As long as we have human settlements with basic communication equipment, the signal will spread to every corner of human space. But this was not going to be an ordinary message. Jake had decided that words alone were not enough. The resistance needed something more powerful, something more primitive, something that would reach into the deepest part of what it meant to be human. In the corner of the chamber, an old man named Frank Miller was setting up a collection of drums. Frank was 70 years old and had been a musician before the war. He had learned to play the drums as a child from his grandfather, who had served in the military many years ago. The drums were made from metal salvaged from destroyed human ships. These rhythms are older than space travel, Frank told Jake as he arranged the drums in a circle. My grandfather's grandfather played them before battles during the old wars on Earth. They were meant to call warriors together and strike fear into the hearts of enemies. Jake nodded. He understood the power of tradition. Even in the age of faster-than-light travel and quantum computers, humans still carried the memories of their ancestors. The drums connected them to thousands of years of human history, to every battle their people had ever fought and won. Roy Price had arrived from New Montana the day before, with news from other resistance cells. The underground movement was growing, stronger, but the different groups were having trouble coordinating their attacks. They needed a way to communicate that the aliens could not intercept or understand. The Zephyrians monitor all our electronic communications, Roy reported, but they don't understand human music or cultural traditions. If we can embed tactical information in the drumbeat patterns, we can coordinate attacks across multiple worlds without the aliens knowing what we're planning. Amy had figured out how to do exactly that. The quantum transmitters could carry much more information than simple sound waves. She could layer multiple frequencies into the drumbeat signal, hiding complex data inside what appeared to be primitive music. Claire Dixon was also in the chamber, working on the final calibrations for the transmitter array. She had been traveling between different resistance cells for months, helping to set up receiver stations that could pick up and relay the quantum signal. Every human settlement now had at least one hidden receiver. All stations are reporting ready, Claire announced from her control panel. We have confirmation from 47 different worlds and space stations. The network is complete. Jake looked around the chamber at all the people who had worked so hard to make this moment possible. There were miners from New Montana, farmers from New Kansas, engineers from space stations, and soldiers from a dozen different worlds. They had all risked their lives to build this machine and create this network. Frank Miller took his position behind the drums and looked at Jake. What message do you want me to send? Jake thought for a moment. The first drumbeat signal would be heard by every human in the galaxy. It needed to say something important, something that would give hope to people who had been hiding and running for months. Tell them we're still here, Jake said. Tell them we're still fighting. Tell them we're coming. Frank began to play. The sound started as a simple, steady rhythm. Boom, boom, boom. The deep bass notes echoed off the stone walls of the underground chamber. Then Frank added more complex patterns, weaving traditional drum sequences with new rhythms that Amy had designed to carry coded information. Amy watched her control panel as the quantum transmitters picked up the drumbeat and converted it into signals that could travel faster than light. The machine hummed quietly as it sent the first human message in 6 months across the galaxy. On New Montana, Pete Johnson was in his hidden tunnel when he heard the drums coming from a small speaker that Claire had installed weeks earlier. He smiled for the first time since the war began. The sound meant that someone, somewhere, was still organizing the resistance. It meant that humans were not giving up. On New Kansas, Danny Brooks was working in his fields when the drumbeat reached his farm. He stopped what he was doing and listened to the rhythm. Hidden in the pattern, he could hear tactical information about supply routes and meeting times. But more importantly, he could hear the message of defiance and hope. Across human space, in hidden bases and secret shelters, humans stopped what they were doing and listened to the drums. Some people cried. Some people cheered. Some people just stood quietly and felt their hearts beating in time with the ancient rhythm. The Zephyrians heard the signal too. In their command centers and warships, alien technicians detected the quantum transmissions and tried to figure out what they meant. But to them, it sounded like meaningless noise. They had conquered 17 different species, but they had never encountered anything like human music. Supreme Commander Thex Aval was in his flagship orbiting Earth when his communications officer reported the drumbeat signals. The alien leader listened to a recording of the transmission and dismissed it as unimportant. It is just the death cries of a defeated species, Thexval told his staff. Ignore it. Focus on extracting more resources from their worlds. But on The remote research station Omega-7, an alien scientist named Dr. Kessitar was not so sure. He had studied human culture before the war and recognized that the drumbeat patterns were too complex to be random. He wrote a report suggesting that the signals might be a form of communication, but his superiors ignored it. The drums played for 3 hours. Frank Miller's hands were bleeding by the time he finished, but he did not stop. He played every traditional rhythm he knew, and many new ones that Amy had taught him. By the end, humans across the galaxy had received detailed information about resistance activities, supply drops, and planned attacks. More importantly, they had received proof that the human spirit was not broken. When the transmission ended, Jake stood in the quiet chamber and felt something he had not felt since the day of the Great Defeat. He felt hope. The galaxy thought humans were extinct, but they were wrong. The drums had proven that humanity was very much alive, and this was just the beginning. 2 months after the virus infected the Zephyrian communication network, Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the rebuilt UES Liberty. The ship was hidden deep inside the asteroid field of the Kepler system, but it was no longer running or hiding. Today, the Liberty would lead the largest human fleet assembled since the Great Defeat. Jake looked out at the dozens of ships floating around his vessel. Most of them had been civilian cargo haulers and mining ships before the war. Now, they were armed with weapons that Dr. Amy Walsh and her team had built using stolen Zephyrian technology. The ships looked rough and patched together, but they were ready to fight. "All ships report ready for the final assault," announced Lieutenant Sam Davis from his position at the communication console. Sam had been with Jake since the beginning of the war. He looked older now, with gray streaks in his hair and tired lines around his eyes. But his voice was strong and determined. The final battle had been planned for weeks using the drumbeat communication network. Every resistance cell in human space knew their role. Pete Johnson's miners would attack Zephyrian ground bases. Roy Price's guerrilla fighters would destroy alien supply lines. Claire Dixon's stealth ships would disable enemy sensors, and Jake would lead a direct assault on the main Zephyrian fleet. But first, Jake had a message to deliver to the galaxy. "Open a channel on all frequencies," Jake ordered. "It's time for the whole universe to hear what humans have to say." The communication systems activated, sending Jake's voice across every star system in known space. The message would reach not only the Zephyrians, but also the Galactic Council and every other alien species that had written off humanity as extinct. "To the Zephyrian Empire and all who would threaten humanity," Jake began, his voice calm but filled with steel. "You thought you had won. You thought we were extinct. You were wrong." On his flagship orbiting Earth, Supreme Commander Thexval listened to the human message with growing alarm. For months, his forces had been plagued by the constant drumbeat, signals, and coordinated resistance attacks. His troops were demoralized and confused. Many of his ships had navigation problems because the drumbeat virus interfered with their control systems. "For 300,000 years, our ancestors beat these drums before battle," Jake continued. "They beat them to call warriors. They beat them to strike fear into the hearts of enemies. They beat them to say one simple thing: we are coming." As Jake spoke, the drumbeat signal that had been broadcasting for months suddenly changed. Frank Miller, still playing in his underground chamber on New Texas, began the most complex rhythm he had ever performed. It was the sound of an army marching, of hearts beating in unison, of a species that refused to surrender. But this time, the drums carried more than just sound. Amy Walsh had programmed a special frequency into the signal, a frequency that would do something unprecedented to Zephyrian technology. On Thexval's flagship, the navigation computers began to malfunction. The ship's controls started responding to the rhythm of the human drums instead of the pilot's commands. The steering system turned left and right in time with the drum beat. The weapon systems fired randomly. The shields flickered on and off, following the musical pattern. "What is happening to our ships?" Thexval demanded from his panicking crew. "Sir, all of our vessels are experiencing the same problem," his chief engineer reported. Our computers are synchronized to the human drumbeat signal. We cannot control our own ships. Amy Walsh had made her greatest discovery. The constant drumbeat. Virus had not just infected Zephyrian communication systems, it had created a resonance frequency that interfered with their navigation computers. Every alien ship in human space was now dancing to the rhythm of human war drums. Jake smiled as he watched the enemy fleet through his view screen. The massive Zephyrian warships were spinning and turning helplessly, unable to fight or flee. Their advanced technology had become their weakness. "All human ships, begin the attack," Jake ordered. The rebuilt human fleet moved forward like a pack of wolves. Pete Johnson's converted mining ships used their industrial cutting lasers to slice through Zephyrian armor. Claire Dixon's stealth vessels appeared from nowhere to fire missiles at disabled enemy ships. Roy Price coordinated ground attacks that destroyed alien bases while their defenders were trapped in malfunctioning vehicles. But the battle was not just happening in space. On New Earth, Betty Kane led 10,000 resistance fighters in a final assault on the main Zephyrian garrison. The alien troops could not coordinate their defense because their communication equipment was playing human drums instead of tactical information. "For everyone we lost," Betty shouted as she led her fighters through the streets of New Earth's capital city. "For our families, for our freedom, for our future." The human fighters moved with purpose and coordination that the aliens could not match. They had been preparing for this moment for months. Every street corner and building was familiar territory. Every resistance fighter knew exactly what to do. On New Montana, Pete Johnson's miners emerged from their tunnels in vehicles they had built from mining equipment and alien technology. The machines looked strange, with drilling arms converted into weapons and cargo haulers turned into tanks, but they were effective against the confused Zephyrian forces. "This is for 6 months of hiding underground," Pete said as his improvised war machine destroyed an alien command post. "This is for everyone who thought we were finished." The Zephyrian collapse was complete and overwhelming. Their ships could not maneuver. Their communications were useless. Their troops were isolated and outnumbered. In less than 6 hours, the species that had conquered 17 star systems was defeated by the humans they thought they had exterminated. Supreme Commander Thexval found himself trapped on his flagship as human ships surrounded him. The drumbeat signal was so loud in his command center that he could barely think. His crew was in panic, unable to operate any of their systems normally. A communication request came from the human fleet. Thexval had no choice but to accept it. Jake Morrison's face appeared on the main screen of the Zephyrian flagship. The human looked tired but determined. Behind him, Thexval could see the bridge of a ship that had been rebuilt from wreckage and scrap metal. "Supreme Commander Thexval," Jake said, "I am offering you one chance to surrender. Order your remaining forces to stand down, and we will allow you to leave human space alive." Thexval looked around his command center. His ship was helpless. His fleet was destroyed or disabled. His troops across dozens of worlds were being defeated by an enemy he had underestimated completely. "I surrender," Thexval said quietly. The word spread quickly through the Zephyrian forces. Within hours, alien commanders across human space were laying down their weapons and requesting terms of surrender. The war was over. News of the human victory reached the Galactic Council within days. The alien species that had dismissed humanity as primitive and extinct were shocked to learn that humans had not only survived, but had defeated one of the galaxy's most powerful military forces. Jake stood once again on the bridge of the UES Liberty, but now it was the flagship of the reformed human colonial navy. Through the view screen, he could see Earth in the distance. The blue and green planet was free once again. In the background, the drums continued to play. But they were no longer drumbeats of war. They were drumbeats of victory, of survival, of a species that had faced extinction and refused to accept it. Frank Miller, now 71 years old and a hero to every human in the galaxy, played the victory rhythm from his chamber on New Texas. His hands were scarred from months of constant drumming, but he smiled as he played. The sound that had once called humans to hide was now calling them to celebrate. The galaxy had learned a lesson that would echo through the stars for thousands of years. Never underestimate a species that has spent 300,000 years learning how to fight. Never assume that technology alone can defeat the human spirit. And never, ever ignore the sound of war drums. Because once those drums begin to beat, there is only one possible outcome: total human victory. 3 months after the Great Defeat, Pete Johnson crawled through a dark tunnel deep beneath the surface of New Montana. The tunnel was barely wide enough for a man to fit through, and water dripped from the rocky ceiling onto his back. Behind him, 6 other humans followed in single file, each carrying a backpack full of supplies. Pete was a mining engineer before the war. He had spent 15 years digging tunnels and extracting rare metals from asteroids and distant planets. He knew how to work underground better than almost anyone alive. Now he was using those skills to fight back against the aliens who had conquered his world. New Montana was a mining colony with a population of 50,000 people. The planet was rich in titanium and other metals that humans needed to build their ships and cities. When the Zephyrians came, they did not destroy the planet. Instead, they landed their own ships and took control of the mines. They wanted the metals for themselves. The aliens thought the human miners would just give up and work for them. They were wrong. Pete and his team reached the end of the tunnel and climbed up through a hidden entrance into an abandoned warehouse. The building had been empty for years, but now it served as a meeting place for the resistance. 20 other humans were already waiting inside, sitting on old boxes and broken machinery. "Did anyone see you coming here?" Pete asked quietly. Everyone shook their heads. They had learned to be very careful. The Zephyrians had sensors that could detect large groups of humans moving together. In the corner of the warehouse sat Dr. Amy Walsh. She was a scientist who had studied alien life forms before the war. When the Zephyrians attacked Earth's moon base, she barely escaped in a small research ship. Now she was the smartest person in the resistance, and everyone looked to her for answers about their enemies. "I have good news and bad news," Amy said, standing up from her chair. She was holding a small device that looked like a broken radio. "The good news is that I figured out how their communication system works. The bad news is that they are much smarter than we thought." Amy had been working for weeks to understand Zephyrian technology. Every time the resistance fighters found pieces of alien equipment, they brought them to her. She took the devices apart and studied how they worked. It was dangerous work because some of the alien technology would explode if handled wrong. "Their computers are at least 200 years ahead of ours," Amy continued. "But they have one weakness. They use quantum encryption for all their messages, which means we might be able to break into their network if we can build the right equipment." A man named Roy Price raised his hand. He had been a soldier in Earth's special forces before the war. Roy was 40 years old and had fought in 3 different conflicts before the aliens came. He was teaching the miners and farmers how to be soldiers. "How long will it take to build this equipment?" Roy asked. "Maybe 6 months, if we can find the right parts," Amy replied. "We need quantum processors and crystalline memory cores. The Zephyrians use them in their mining equipment." Pete smiled. "I know where we can find those things. The aliens have been using our old mining facilities. They brought their own equipment, but they are also using some of our machines. If we can get inside the main processing center, we might be able to steal what you need." "That place is heavily guarded," said another voice from the back of the room. It was Claire Dixon, a young engineer who had worked on space stations before the war. She had escaped from Frontier Station Beta when the aliens attacked it. "They have at least 50 guards and detection systems everywhere," Claire was only 25 years old, but she was an expert at building and fixing spacecraft. She had been working on converting civilian ships into stealth reconnaissance vessels. The Resistance needed to be able to move around without being detected by Zephyrian sensors. "We don't need to fight our way in," Roy said. "We just need to be smart about it. I have been watching their guard patterns for weeks. They change shifts every 8 hours. There is a 10-minute window when the new guards are getting briefed and the old guards are leaving. That's when we strike." On the other side of the galaxy, another resistance cell was forming on the farming world of New Kansas. Danny Brooks had been a simple farmer before the war. He grew corn and wheat to feed the growing human population. When the Zephyrians came, they destroyed most of the farms and forced the remaining farmers to grow food for their own troops. Danny did not like working for the aliens. He secretly began to organize the other farmers. They started hiding food supplies and weapons in underground storage areas that the aliens did not know about. The resistance on New Kansas was growing stronger every day. Danny's farm was located 50 kilometers from the main Zephyrian base. It was the perfect place to hide supplies that were being moved between different resistance groups. Ships could land in his fields at night and take off before dawn. The aliens never suspected that food shipments were carrying weapons and communication equipment. Back on New Montana, Pete and his team were preparing for their most dangerous mission yet. They needed to break into the main mining facility and steal the quantum processors that Amy needed to build her code-breaking equipment. Roy had spent weeks studying the alien guards. He learned their routines and figured out when they were most vulnerable. The Zephyrians were confident that humans could not threaten them, so they were not as careful as they should have been. "Remember, we get in fast and get out faster," Roy told the team. "We need those processors, but not if it means getting everyone killed. If something goes wrong, abort the mission and run." Amy was working in her secret laboratory, which was hidden deep in the abandoned subway tunnels beneath New Montana's capital city. She had been trying to reverse engineer Zephyrian technology for months. Every small breakthrough gave her hope that humans could fight back effectively. The laboratory was filled with broken alien devices and human computers that she had modified to work with the alien technology. Wires and circuits covered every surface. The air smelled like burned electronics and metal polish. Amy's biggest discovery was that the Zephyrians used sound waves in their computers. Their technology was based on frequency patterns rather than the electrical signals that humans used. If she could figure out the right frequencies, she might be able to send false signals to their equipment. But she needed more advanced components to build a transmitter powerful enough to reach multiple Zephyrian ships. That's why Pete's mission was so important. Without those quantum processors, her research would be useless. Claire was in another part of the city, working on modifying a cargo ship that the Resistance had captured. The ship needed to be able to avoid Zephyrian sensors while carrying supplies between different worlds. She was installing a new stealth system that would make the ship invisible to most alien detection equipment. "If this works, we can start moving larger groups of people and heavier weapons," Claire told her assistant, a young mechanic named Bobby Chen. "The aliens won't even know we're there." As the months passed, the Resistance grew stronger. More humans joined the fight. They learned to communicate using coded messages that the aliens could not understand. They built hidden bases in caves and abandoned buildings. They started to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could win this war. But they needed something more than just weapons and technology. They needed a way to coordinate their attacks across multiple worlds. They needed a signal that could reach every human in the galaxy. Pete finished loading his backpack with explosives and cutting tools. Tomorrow night, he and his team would break into the most heavily guarded facility on New Montana. It was dangerous, but it was also necessary. The underground resistance was about to take its biggest risk yet. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the front of his ship's control room. Through the big window, he could see space filled with enemy ships. 3 different alien armies had come together for one reason: to destroy all humans on Earth. The ships out there were huge. Each one was 3 times bigger than Jake's ship, the USS Defiance. The enemy had weapons that could break apart whole planets. Jake had never seen so many warships in one place before. "Captain, Admiral Carter wants to talk to you," said Lisa Barnes. She worked at the communications desk and her voice sounded worried. Jake pressed a button and Admiral Carter's face appeared on the main screen. The old man looked tired and scared. Lines covered his face like he had not slept for days. "Jake, the government has said yes to Project Prometheus. You are our only hope now," Carter said. Jake felt his stomach drop. Project Prometheus was something that might save Earth or might kill everyone trying. 3 years ago, a smart woman named Dr. Elena Rodriguez had an idea. She thought humans could use their creativity as a weapon. Other alien races had lost their ability to think in new ways, but humans still had it. "Sir, are we really going to try this?" asked Commander Alex Turner. He was Jake's second in command and stood next to the captain's chair. "The computer tests showed we might all die doing this." Jake looked at the enemy ships on his screen. The Zephyrian Empire had brought 1,000 ships. Their ships looked like they were made of crystal and glowed with deadly energy shields. No one had ever broken through those shields before. The Kralix hegemony ships looked like giant living things. They were part machine and part animal. Their weapons could melt anything they touched. Jake had heard stories about whole cities turning into soup when Kralix ships attacked them. The Vorthan collective ships were the strangest. They had perfect geometric shapes that hurt to look at. Their weapons could bend space itself. They could make a piece of space fold in half and crush anything inside. "Mr. Turner, get the ship ready for quantum fold activation," Jake ordered. He tried to keep his voice steady even though his hands were shaking. "Dr. Rodriguez, is your machine ready?" Dr. Rodriguez looked up from her workstation. Her hands moved fast over controls that seemed to change shape as she touched them. The machine she had built was called the Chaos Engine. It was supposed to let the ship change itself in ways that were impossible. "The Chaos Engine is ready, Captain," she said. "But I need to tell you something important. Once we turn it on, no one knows what will happen. We are teaching the ship to make up new rules as it goes along." Everyone on the control room looked nervous. What they were about to try had never been done before. They wanted to make a ship that could change its own body in real time. It would adapt to threats faster than any alien computer could think. "The enemy is calling us," Barnes said. The screen changed to show an alien with 6 glowing eyes. This was War Prime Zelthak of the Zephyrian Empire. He was the commander of their whole army. His face showed nothing but hate for humans. "Human ship, you will give up now," Zelthak said. His voice sounded like metal scraping against metal. "Your kind's time of dying has come." Jake smiled, but it was not a happy smile. "War Prime, you are about to learn something about humans. We are the only ones in the galaxy who still tell stories about monsters." "What are you talking about, human?" Zelthak asked. "We tell stories about monsters because we know how to become them when we need to," Jake said. Dr. Rodriguez finished her preparations. The Chaos Engine was a collection of quantum computers that no alien race understood. It worked by breaking the rules of physics on purpose. While alien computers tried to predict what would happen next, the Chaos Engine would make sure that the wrong thing happened instead. The idea was simple but dangerous. Most aliens had evolved to be logical and predictable. They made the best choice every time. But humans were different. Sometimes humans made terrible choices just to see what would happen. Sometimes they did things that made no sense at all, and sometimes that was exactly what they needed to win. "Captain, incoming message from all 3 enemy fleets," Barnes said. The screen split into 3 parts. On one side was War Prime Zelthak. On another was Admiral Krix of the Kralix, who looked like a giant bug wearing armor made of bones. The third showed Hierophant 977 of the Vorthan Collective, which looked like a floating metal head with too many angles. "Humans," Admiral Krix said, his voice wet and disgusting. "Your fighting spirit will be remembered. We will keep some of you alive to study in our labs." Hierophant 977 spoke in a voice that sounded like a computer. "Your chaotic nature creates disorder in the universe. We will fix this problem by removing you from existence. War Prime Zeltak leaned forward. Your species has caused enough trouble. Today we bring order to this part of space. Jake looked around his control room. Lieutenant Kevin Brooks worked at navigation. Ensign Maria Santos handled weapons. Commander Patricia Lee ran the science station. They were all good people who had volunteered for what everyone knew was a suicide mission. These men and women had families back on Earth. They had dreams and hopes for the future. But they were here anyway, ready to die if it meant their planet might survive. Dr. Rodriguez, activate the Chaos Engine, Jake said. Yes, sir, she replied. Her finger moved toward the activation button. Wait, Turner said. Captain, once we do this, we can never go back. The ship will never be the same. Jake thought about Earth behind them. 3 billion people lived there. Children playing in parks, old people sitting on porches, families eating dinner together, all of them depending on this one ship to save them. The aliens think they know everything about fighting, Jake said. They think the universe follows rules that can't be broken. Today, we show them what happens when humans decide to rewrite those rules. Dr. Rodriguez pressed the button. The USS Defiance began to change in ways that should not have been possible. The walls started flowing like water. The floor became transparent, then solid again. Energy moved through the ship in patterns that made no sense but somehow worked perfectly. All hands prepare for combat, Jake announced over the ship's communication system. Today we fight not just for Earth but for the right of every thinking being in the universe to be unpredictable. Outside, the 3 alien fleets began moving toward them. Thousands of ships carrying weapons that could destroy worlds. But inside the USS Defiance, something impossible was being born. A ship that refused to follow the laws of physics. A vessel powered by human stubbornness and creativity. Tabai. Battle for Earth was about to begin.